The scripture lesson for today is from Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 to 20. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven.
May God add blessings to the reading, the hearing, and the interpreting of God's holy word. Our text this morning is a continuation of where we left off last Sunday. This continues the Sermon on the Mount, which again continues on for 2 entire chapters in Matthew's Gospel. And in that respect, the Sermon on the Mount is somewhat unique. If we look at the other Gospels, Mark has very, very little of this. There are a few parallel phrases, but there's no condensed teaching like we find here in Matthew. And even though Luke parallels these same phrases, these same teachings, probably about 75% of the time, they're scattered throughout his gospel. They're not condensed. And so we can sort of determine that Matthew intended this to be very much a condensed, very concise teaching. John's gospel, there really is no Sermon on the Mount. Probably the closest thing there is where he records the feeding of the 5,000, which also sort of takes place in the foothills of the mountains. But none of this teaching is paralleled in John's writings. And so we're gifted with this very special collection of teachings and sayings from Jesus. And it really becomes a package on how to live out discipleship. As we noted last week, the majority of what Jesus says in this collection really is very spiritual in its foundation and its nature. It's about putting our inner life in alignment with Jesus' way. Most of the Sermon on the Mount is about getting our inner life in order so that our spirit actually shines through in our daily living. And today's reading centers very much on that concept. We hear about salt, lamps, the law. Think about it. What's the innate quality of salt? It gives flavor, and that is its value. And if that value, that quality of flavor is lost, it is no longer of use to people. The lamp, if it's not set up high above, it cannot shine light through the house or a room, let alone the city. And so if it's hidden, it no longer serves a purpose. Jesus talks about the law, that he has come to fulfill it, not to cast it away. And it's probably important to remember, the scribes and the Pharisees genuinely dedicated their lives to trying to live out the law as closely as possible. Unfortunately, in many cases, the interpretation of how to do that was an external show more than it was an inner transformation. The law is to be lived out until we understand and can transcend it, meaning that we have internalized its essence and live it out day by day. Over the past few weeks, I've been involved online with a sort of book study and discussion group, taking a look at a book entitled The Sermon on the Mount. It's written in 1934 by Emmett Fox. Fox was a member of the New Thought movement in the early 19th century, and indeed continued to serve a very large church in New York City for years, up through World War II, and he just died in 1951. But a very recognized and revered spiritual leader for a lot of the people within the New Thought movement. And basically, the movement was an effort to strip away a lot of the accumulated, institutionalized interpretation of Jesus' teachings. And the name New Thought has a lot to do with internalizing and living out your life through that perspective, rooted in the core of Jesus' teaching. It's an attempt to get to the very core of Jesus' intent without all the layers of church filtering and redaction that has taken over through the centuries and often shades how we understand Scripture at times. And coming out of that, Fox talks about the life of discipleship. Again, being deeply rooted in the core teachings of Jesus. And part of the emphasis here is that a disciple's life is not all about doing the right thing. Precisely what Jesus accused many of the scribes and Pharisees to be caught up in. Nor is it about getting others to be like us. Fox writes, "Never try to force other people to accept spiritual truth. Instead, see to it that they are so favorably impressed by your own life and conduct, and the peace and joy that radiates from you, that they will come running to you of their own accord, begging you to give them the wonderful thing you have." Instead of constant doing, discipleship is about becoming and being the right person. It's slowly becoming the unique individual God created each of us to be. It's day by day letting Scripture deepen our understanding of discipleship. It's centering our thoughts deeper into the Christ presence that in turn ignites our spirit into a shining beacon. Fox puts it this way: the Christian life does not require that we possess perfection of character, or else which of us would be able to live it? What it does require is honest, genuine striving for that perfection. Discipleship is an ongoing, lifelong process. Just like Scripture, it's a huge onion. And you can peel layer after layer after layer, and there's still more there. It's a journey. It's not a destination until we make that passage where we reunite with God directly. When our inner spiritual life begins to align on the Christ path, our outer life will reflect and project it, regardless of where we are on that journey. And when our outer lives radiate the Christ light that shines within us, others will notice and be attracted to it. And this is how disciples not only grow the church, but also how they slowly transform the world. Amen.